Congratulations, you have just awakened in 15th century England. The year is 1447, and you find yourself in London, a lively metropolis defined by narrow, winding streets and timber-framed dwellings. The air is thick with the scent of smoke from numerous hearths, blended with the less pleasant odors of a medieval city, animal waste, decaying refuse, and the Thames, which functions as both water supply and sewer. However, your immediate worries are more pressing. You have been accused of treason against King Henry VI. The charge is false, stemming from court politics and the whispers of enemies. Yet in this world, truth frequently yields to power. You now find yourself being guided through the imposing stone gatehouse of the Tower of London, a fortress nearly 4 centuries old. The positive is that the tower is a royal palace, boasting splendid halls and royal apartments adorned with vibrant tapestries and fine furnishings. The negative is that you are not destined for those areas. Instead, the Wyman warders, clad in their distinctive uniforms, escort you deeper into the fortress toward the dark dungeons beneath the White Tower. These Wyman warders, the tower's guards, are not ordinary soldiers, they are specially selected veterans with years of loyal service to the crown. In your time, they would be akin to elite security guards with impeccable service records. Their duty is more than just to keep you in. To ensure everything within these walls remains within these walls. As you descend worn stone steps into the dungeon level, the air grows noticeably colder and damper. The walls glisten with moisture, and your torch casts jumping shadows across the rough stone. The passage narrows, forcing you to duck your head to avoid striking the low ceiling. The smell also changes, a musty mix of mold, human waste, and something else. A metallic, sickly sweet odor makes your stomach clench. You are led to a heavy wooden door, banded with iron. A warder produces a large key, and with a screech of metal, the door swings open. The chamber beyond is surprisingly large but windowless, illuminated only by sputtering torches in wall sconces. The dancing light reveals a room designed to inspire dread. This is the torture chamber in the Tower of London, operational since the reign of King Edward the Fawn in the late 13th century. It is where England's most sophisticated methods of pain and coercion are practiced. The overseer holds the title of the Duke of Exat's daughter, a darkly humorous nickname for the rack, which the Duke of Exat introduced to England in 1420. In the room's center is that device, the rack. It is a rectangular wooden frame with rollers at both ends. Ropes are fixed to these rollers attached to manacles for wrists and ankles. By turning the rollers with levers, the victim's body is stretched, dislocating joints and tearing muscles. This device is engineered to inflict excruciating pain without immediate death. Other instruments line the walls. Thumb screws crushing the fingers, the scavenger's daughter compressing the body instead of stretching it. Manacles for suspending prisoners by the wrists, and an assortment of irons, pliers, and knives whose purposes you'd rather not contemplate. The chamber is designed to work on your mind before it works on your body. The mere sight of these instruments is meant to break your will and convince you to confess before the physical torture even begins. This psychological manipulation is named tritio realis and is a calculated element of the torture process. 2 men await you in the chamber: Sir John Plett, the lieutenant of the Tower, who is responsible for high-profile prisoners, and Master Edward Dalton, the king's official torturer, a role dating back to the time of King John in the early 13th century. Dalton is a broad-shouldered man with thick forearms and calloused hands. Contrary to expectation, Dalton is not a savage brute who enjoys inflicting pain. He is a professional with a specific role, extracting confessions and information. He adheres to procedures and rules developed through centuries of practice. Torture in medieval England was not arbitrary cruelty. It was a regulated process within the justice system. "Do you know why you're here?" Sir John asks, his voice surprisingly gentle. Before you can reply, he continues, "You are accused of plotting against His Majesty, King Henry. Treason carries the penalty of death, yet a confession now might save you from the worst fate. You protest your innocence, but Sir John merely sighs. At first, they say, he says, Master Dalton, show our guest what awaits those who refuse to speak truthfully." The torturer steps forward, his face impassive. The interrogation begins, he explains as if discussing the weather. "If you provide satisfactory answers, no further action is needed." He gestures to the rack. This is where the rigorous examination takes place. First, we will strip you and bind your wrists. Then, we will ask our questions again. If you still refuse to cooperate, we begin with the lesser tortures. Dalton picks up a thumbscrew, a simple device of metal bars with a screw mechanism. This, he says, compresses the thumb or fingers until the bones crack. Most wait until the moment arrives. He places it down and moves to the rack. If simpler methods prove ineffective, we proceed to this. Your arms and legs are fastened here. As we turn these levers, the ropes tighten. Pain first arises as your joints stretch, followed by dislocation. Eventually, if needed, the limbs may separate from the body. Few survive beyond the initial dislocation. His clinical account is nearly more terrifying than a warning. This is not personal for him. It is merely his job executed with the detached efficiency of any skilled craftsman. But that is not the whole story. Sir John adds, the mind breaks before the body for most. We have held men in these dungeons for years, in darkness, in silence, with only enough food and water to sustain them. Time loses meaning, sleep turns into torment, punctuated by questioning. The world contracts to these stone walls. He leans closer. Think on that before you force us to more extreme measures. A confession now means a quick death. Resistance, he leaves the sentence unfinished. The fate that awaits you is the same that befell Cuthbert Simpson, a Protestant deacon arrested during the reign of Catholic Queen Mary Tudor, just a century from now in your current timeline. For refusing to name his fellow worshippers, Simpson endured the rack 3 separate times. During one session, the torturer drove an arrow through his bound fingers. Despite this agony, Simpson never broke. His recompense for such extraordinary bravery, being burned alive at Smithfield in 1558. Yet it is not solely religious dissenters who enter the torture chamber. Political prisoners, suspected spies, and accused traitors are also there. Guy Fawkes, who is involved in a plot to blow up Parliament in 1605, will suffer such severe torture that his signature on his confession will be almost unrecognizable. A trembling scroll from a man whose body has been broken. One final opportunity, Sir John states. Confess your accomplices and receive the king's pardon. You face a turning point. Torture in the Tower involves more than just pain. It is about shattering the will, eliminating resistance through a blend of physical suffering and psychological dread. Every aspect of this room, from its subterranean setting to its tools, is crafted to amplify fear and hopelessness. The torturer waits calmly. This is merely another day for him. Unlike the sadistic Bishop Bonner, the Devil's Dancing Bear, who will torture hundreds during Queen Mary's reign a century from now, Master Dalton harbors no pleasure in his work. He merely performs his duty to the crown, extracting information deemed necessary for the realm's security. The practice of torture in England is governed by rules, at least theoretically, requiring a warrant, usually signed by members of the Privy Council. These distinctions are meant only for treason, not ordinary crimes, and the goal is information extraction, not punishment. Yet in reality, these differences offer no solace to those on the rack or suspended. Sir John gestures, and the guards move to seize you. The choice is over. Regardless of guilt or innocence, you are now trapped in a system where pain is a tool of statecraft and human bodies are instruments to be broken for intelligence. As they start removing your clothes, the initial phase of torture, you grasp why medieval torture chambers were so potent. It's not merely the physical agony, though that is horrific. It is the absolute helplessness, the awareness that you are completely subject to those who view your suffering as both necessary and justified. The chamber's cold air sends shivers down your skin. The stone floor chills your bare feet. The manacles snap shut around your wrists with a sharp click. As Master Dalton draws nearer with professional focus, you instantly grasp why few survive even a single day in a medieval torture chamber. The real terror isn't solely the instruments of pain, but the systematic, almost bureaucratic infliction of suffering. In the medieval view, the body is a conduit to truth. Shatter the body, and the truth will reveal itself. Whether its accuracy matters is irrelevant. The system believes it so, and that belief carries deadly consequences for those inside it. As Dalton prepares to begin his work, the wall torches flicker, casting monstrous dancing shadows across the ancient stone that have witnessed centuries of human suffering. These walls have absorbed countless screams that never reached the outside world, and now they patiently await yours. The initial question brings the ordeal in one of history's most dreaded institutions, a place where justice and cruelty merge into a single horrific experience that few endure without preserving their body and mind. Outside the tower, London proceeds with its daily routine, oblivious to or indifferent to what occurs in the shadows beneath the White Tower. This division between the outward appearance of justice and its concealed mechanisms is central to the torture chamber's efficacy. In shadow and whispers, its true horrors are known only to those who have suffered them. As the first device is prepared, you understand the fear of medieval torture and why its legacy haunts our imagination centuries later. This is not merely bodily pain, but the shattering of the human spirit, a methodical dismantling of what makes a person whole. As Dalton's instruments start working, the dungeon is filled with echoes joining the ghostly chorus of all who preceded you in this chamber of sorrow, a chorus spanning centuries that endures long after your voice fades. Master Dalton approaches with unnerving calm. His movements are neither hurried nor wavering. He moves with the practiced efficiency of a craftsman who has executed these tasks innumerable times. For him, this is not cruelty, but craftsmanship. The chamber surrounding you, cold and firm, has been meticulously designed for its function. It is not merely to inflict pain, but to shatter the spirit before the body. Dalton explains that we begin with simple methods, selecting a pair of thumbscrews from his collection of instruments. Most admit this before we proceed further. The thumbscrew, you see, is a simple device, metal bars joined by screws. Your thumb is wedged between the bars. As the screw tightens, pressure builds until the bone fractures. Despite its simplicity, it is favored by torturers across Europe. Initially employed by the Russian army for soldier discipline, the device traveled west, where it served the purpose of extracting confessions. Sir John watches from a corner, his expression betraying no emotion. As the tower's sole tenant, he has seen countless interrogations. For him, this is the necessary unpleasantness of statecraft in service to the crown. Tell us of your conspirators, he says, who plotted with you against His Majesty. You protest your innocence again, knowing it's futile. In this system, accusation itself is nearly proof of guilt. The question isn't whether you'll confess, but how much pain you'll endure before doing so. Dalton doesn't immediately apply the thumbscrew. Instead, he places it on a small brayer. Cold metal is uncomfortable, he explains. The unbearable heat of the metal mirrors the sophisticated understanding of pain held by medieval torturers. They understood that anticipation amplifies suffering. Each moment observing the metal react in the coals is a moment of mounting terror. The chamber facilitates this psychological torment. Windowless and subterranean, it exists outside conventional time. Here there is no day or night, only the eternal flicker of torches. The walls are so thick that no scream reaches the outside world. You are completely isolated from society, in a place where normal rules no longer exist. While we wait, Dalton continues, suggesting perhaps you'd like to see what happens if you remain stubborn. He gestures to another device, the strappado, which is a simple rope and pulley system attached to the ceiling. The victim's hands are tied behind their back and secured to the rope. Then they are raised, wrenching the shoulders out of joint. Sometimes weights are placed on the feet for further torment. Dalton proudly points out the method's elegance, its simplicity. No physical touch is needed. Your own body weight suffices. The torturer's casual descriptions are integral to the process. By detailing future events, he instills vivid imagery. Your imagination aids him, amplifying your terror. In the shadowed corner rests a third device, the scavenger's daughter. Instead of stretching the body, this fish contraption compresses it. The victim is forced into a crouch. Metal bands are then tightened until movement ceases. As pressure builds, breathing becomes labored. Eventually, blood vessels burst, and blood flows from the nose, ears, and fingernails. An English invention, Sir John observes, with a disturbing note of pride. Designed by Sir Leonard Skington during Henry VIII's reign, these instruments cause maximum pain without death. A dead prisoner reveals nothing. The medieval torturer walks a fine line, applying agony to break resistance without killing. Now the thumbscrew glows a dull red. Dalton removes it with tongs and approaches you, the guards holding your arms firmly. The moment is here. Sir John offers one final chance. Speak now, and this can end. But what can you confess? The charges are false. Yet as the hot metal approaches your hand, truth and falsehood become meaningless. The only reality is the impending pain and the desperate need to escape it. This is the dark genius of torture. It renders truth irrelevant. With enough pain, the innocent admit to fabricated crimes, and the guilty accuse the innocent. The system constructs its own reality from suffering. Too long without an answer, Dalton sighed. We begin. The heated device closes around your thumb. Initially there is only pressure, uncomfortable yet bearable. Then Dalton turns the screw a quarter rotation. The pressure intensifies sharply. Another turn. Now pain flares bright and urgent. Your breath comes in gasps. Another turn. The bone cracks audibly. Sweat breaks out across your body. Another turn. You cry out, unable to contain it. The sound reverberates off stone walls that have witnessed countless screams prior to yours. Sir John demands the names, his voice piercing your agony. Who conspired with you? Desperate, your mind scrambles for words. But before you can fabricate a confession, Dalton eases the tension. Just a taste, he suggests. We still have hours. This, too, is calculated. By offering momentary relief, he proves absolute control over your pain. The intent is obvious. Cooperation eases suffering, resistance heightens it. Within the tower, torture is episodic, delivered in sessions punctuated by recovery. This is not mercy, but strategy. A prisoner permitted partial healing can withstand more sessions, offering greater chances to be questioned, and the wait for return to the chamber becomes a form of torment in itself. Sir John commands you be returned to your cell. We will continue tomorrow after they have had time to consider their position. The guards unchain you and roughly drag your trembling body from the chamber. The thumbscrew has left your hand throbbing with pain, yet no lasting damage has occurred. That will follow if you continue to resist. Your cell is a small stone room containing a straw pallet for sleeping and a bucket for waste. A minuscule barred window, too small for escape, is your sole link to the outside. Through it, you glimpse a narrow sky and hear London's distant sounds, a cruel reminder of life continuing beyond these walls. Food arrives, a bowl of thin gruel and a piece of coarse bread. Medieval prison conditions are designed to be harsh. The tower offers no comfort to its inmates, only the bare minimum sustenance required for questioning. As darkness descends, sleep escapes you. Your wounded hand throbs with agony, and your thoughts are consumed by visions of tomorrow. This psychological torment, the fear of the future, is as much a torture as the physical hurt. Morning arrives without ceremony in your windowless cell. You have no means to measure time except for the sparse meals appearing at random intervals. This temporal confusion is another tool in the torturer's arsenal. The guards have returned, and the journey back to the chamber commences anew. Your legs shake as you descend the stone stairs. Yesterday's session was just an introduction. Today, you realize, will be more severe. The chamber looks the same, yet something new has been set up. A brazier with iron rods heating in the coals rests near the rack. These rods will be used to burn flesh, a further torment. Before the main devices are used, Dalton greets you as if continuing a conversation barely interrupted. I trust you have reflected, he says. Today we must advance, unless you are ready to speak honestly. Sir John stands in the same corner, watching with an impassive expression. For him, this is routine governance. The tower's torture chamber is merely one aspect of state security, no different in goal than the soldiers guarding the city gates. Before we start, he states, you should know that we have questioned your servants. They have related interesting stories about mysterious visitors to your house, about letters destroyed after being read. This is another strategy implying that evidence already exists, that denial is useless. Whether your servants actually spoke is immaterial. The suggestion alone instills doubt and fear. Today's session commences with the strappado. Your wrists are tied behind your back and fastened to the rope. Slowly, the guards raised you until your toes just touched the ground. The pressure on your shoulders was immediate and intense. With a nod from Dalton, they pulled harder, lifting you completely off the floor. The pain differed from the thumbscrew. It was less focused, but more overwhelming. Your entire upper body became a center of agony as your shoulders strained against their natural range of motion. Breathing became difficult as your chest muscles stretched. The names Sir John repeats, yield the names and the ordeal concludes. Silence brings consequences. Dalton signals and the guards abruptly release the rope. You drop several inches before the rope tightens again, sending a shocking jolt through your already stressed shoulder joints. The sound that tears from your throat is barely human. This process of raising, dropping, questioning continues until your shoulders dislocate with an audible pop. The pain is blinding, all-consuming. Many prisoners confess at this point, unable to endure further. But what happens to those who don't? History provides disturbing answers. Cuthbert Simpson, whose story you recalled earlier, endured the rack 3 times without surrendering names. And Askew, arrested for distributing Protestant texts during Henry VIII's reign, was so severely racked that she had to be carried to her execution on a chair, unable to walk. Both chose agony over betrayal. Could you show such extraordinary courage? Would principles or loyalty suffice to endure such suffering? These questions have plagued torture chambers throughout history. Following the strappado, you are laid flat, shoulders wrenched and useless. The agony renders coherent thought nearly impossible. Still, the questioning persists. This can cease, Sir John cautions. Simply tell us what you must reveal. In this moment of extremity, the urge to fabricate a confession is almost overwhelming. Many inflicted such acts, fabricating intricate lies to evade additional torment. However, this respite was frequently fleeting. False confessions generated contradictions, triggering further interrogation and increased torture. The medieval justice system established a nightmarish logic trap. Whether innocent or guilty, once within the torture chamber, escape was nearly impossible. Confession resulted in execution for fabricated crimes. Resistance led to further torture until a confession was finally obtained. Realizing your silence persists, despite your anguish, Dalton prepares for the next phase. The rack awaits the most dreaded apparatus in the chamber. Colloquially known as the Duke of Exeter's daughter, it was brought to England in 1420 specifically for questioning political prisoners. Its function is straightforward and horrific, to extend the human form past its limits. Men have confessed simply by witnessing this device, Dalton asserts. Others have withstood it for hours before speaking. The choice is yours. The guards haul your limp body to the wooden frame. Despite your dislocated shoulders, they bind your wrists to one roller and your ankles to another. This positioning causes excruciating pain as your damaged joints are manipulated. Once more, Sir John utters the names of your accomplices. The moment elongates. Every instinct urges a confession, a statement that might end this nightmare. But what names can you offer? Random acquaintances, friends, family? Such a confession would condemn innocent others to this same chamber. Your silence is acknowledged by Sir John. Dalton turns the lever one notch. The mechanism clicks, the ropes tighten. Your already damaged body stretches slightly, sending fresh waves of agony through your dislocated shoulders. Another turn of the lever. The ratchet clicks again. The sound echoes in the chamber, a small noise signaling immense suffering. Your body stretches further. Dislocated joints are forcibly widened. Muscles tear and ligaments strain. The human body possesses natural limitations. On the rack, these limits are intentionally surpassed. Each ratchet click drives one deeper into a range the body cannot withstand. This is where many were broken. The fusion of current pain and the anticipation of greater suffering overwhelms even the strongest will. Faced with the rack, people confess to impossible crimes, consorting with devils that fly and transform into animals. Under such agony, fantasy and reality merge beyond recognition. Listen closely, Sir John advises, his voice cutting through the haze of your suffering. Bishop Bonner will arrive tomorrow. He possesses special methods for intractable cases such as yours. The name sends a chill through you, even amidst your pain. Bishop Edmund Bonner, the devil's dancing bear, is notorious even in this age of routine cruelty. Under Queen Mary the Firm, he will torture hundreds of Protestants with sadistic ingenuity. Unlike the professional Dalton, Bonner derives personal pleasure from breaking his victims. One night to decide, Sir John suggests, confession tomorrow, or Bishop Bonner's attentions, consider carefully. The session concludes. You are released from the rack, your body now a landscape of wounds. The guards return you to your cell, where you collapse onto the straw pallet. Every movement and exercise is agony. Night falls again. In your cell, pain makes sleep impossible. Your dislocated shoulders throb, and the stretched muscles of your entire body scream with every slight movement. Bishop Bonner's name replays in your mind alongside stories of his cruelty. Medieval torture was not merely physical. Isolation, uncertainty, the deliberate manipulation of hope and fear, these were weapons against the prisoner's mind. Many fractured psychologically before their bodies failed. In the darkness of your cell, a strange event occurs. A figure appears, a monk in a simple brown robe. He offers water, then gently helps you sit up despite your injuries. "I am Brother Thomas," he says softly. "I serve as physician to the tower's prisoners. This too is part of the system." Medical care for torture victims was not humanitarian. It was pragmatic. Dead prisoners offered no testimony. A prisoner who died under interrogation represented a failure of the procedure. Brother Thomas examines your injuries with practiced skill. He manipulates your dislocated shoulders, forcing them back into place with sudden motions that elicit gasps of agony from you. He then applies salves to your wounds and binds your damaged joints. These will heal, he asserts, given sufficient time. But time is the element you lack. Tomorrow holds either confession or Bishop Bonner. Neither offers a cure. While he labors, Brother Thomas quietly discusses his role in this grim setting. He has treated hundreds of prisoners, mitigating their agony just enough to ensure their survival for further interrogation. His position is morally fraught, a healer who facilitates more torture by keeping victims alive. He tells you, without judgment, that he has seen stronger than you break. There is no shame in ending this. Is he offering compassionate advice or acting as another tool of coercion? In the torture chamber, even kindness is suspect. Every interaction is potentially manipulation aimed at eroding resistance. Before departing, Brother Thomas offers a final piece of information. Whether a warning or mercy, Bishop Bonner claims, uses his own methods. Even Master Dalton finds things excessive. His favorite is the burning chair, an iron seat heated from below while the victim is questioned. With these chilling words, he departs, leaving you alone with your pain and the terrible choice that awaits in the morning. Dawn comes too quickly. The cell door opens and the guards appear, but instead of taking you directly to the chamber, they bring you to a small room where water for washing and fresh clothing wait. Sir John wishes you presented properly to the bishop. One explains, this unexpected courtesy is more frightening than immediate return to the chamber. It suggests a ceremonial nature to the coming encounter, something demanding preparation. Cleaned and dressed, you are led not to the underground chamber, but to a larger room on the ground floor of the White Tower. Windows here admit actual daylight, your first glimpse of the sun since entering the tower. The room contains a large table surrounded by chairs. It resembles a council chamber more than a torture room. However, the veneer of civility is broken by what occupies the corner, an iron chair with restraints for arms and legs positioned over a compartment clearly meant for hot coals. 3 men await. Sir John, you recognize him. Beside him is a heavy-set man in bishop's robes, Edmund Bonner himself, his fleshy face etched with amused contempt. The third man is a royal clerk, quill and parchment, prepared to record everything that happens. Our guest arrives, Bonner says, his voice surprisingly soft for a man of his reputation. I have heard much about your stubborn character. Unlike Dalton's professional detachment, Bonner's manner implies personal interest in your suffering. His eyes assess you like a craftsman examining raw material, calculating the best methods to break you. Before commencing with my special methods, he says, pointing to the iron chair, I will offer what Sir John and Master Dalton have already proposed. Confess your treason, name your accomplices, and your punishment will be merciful. A quick execution instead of what I planned. The torture chambers of medieval Europe operated on a sophisticated understanding of human psychology, recognizing that the anticipation of pain can be as effective as pain itself. By showcasing instruments, detailing methods, and providing options, they established a mental structure where confession felt not merely unavoidable, but appealing. This was the chamber's true potency, not solely the physical suffering it caused, but the method by which it reshaped reality for those subjected to it. Inside, innocence became an unattainable indulgence. Truth became whatever alleviated the suffering. Morals and allegiance vanished before the urgent need for relief. Standing before Bishop Bonner, facing the choice of false confession or unbearable suffering, you grasp the fear of the medieval torture chamber. Its true horror was not in its tools, but its inescapable logic, a system devoid of human dignity or objective truth. As the bishop moves to the waiting chair, its metal already glowing from the coals below, you know few would survive even one day there. Not due to physical frailty, but because enduring demanded the sacrifice of either truth or self, actions that shattered the core of human identity. The iron chair radiates heat you can sense from several paces. The choice between confession and resistance is one faced by countless prisoners throughout the medieval era. Some chose truth and endured the consequences. Others sought relief, bearing the moral weight of false confessions and betrayed innocence. There are no simple heroes or villains in this darkest corner of medieval justice. Only human beings trapped in a system that stripped away all but the capacity for pain and the desperate need to flee it. Bishop Bonner shadows you like a predator, assessing his prey. Unlike Master Dalton, whose actions were clinical and detached, Bonner radiates a disturbing enthusiasm for what's to come. His fleshy fingers tap impatiently against his robes while he waits for your decision. "I grow weary of waiting," Bonner finally says. "Perhaps a small demonstration will help clarify your position." He nods to a guard who brings forward a metal implement from the brazier, a branding iron shaped like a heretic's fork. The device is simple but effective. A two-pronged fork is designed to be placed under the chin, with the other end against the chest. It prevents the victim from lowering their head, forcing them to maintain an exhausting upright position. This is merely a taste, Bonner explains. In Spain, they have perfected methods that make our English techniques seem quite merciful by comparison. The Spanish Inquisition, you know, represents the most systematic application of torture in medieval Europe. Established in 1478, it functions with terrifying efficiency. Though Bishop Bonner may derive sadistic pleasure from breaking individuals, the Spanish inquisitors transformed torture into an administrative procedure, complete with scribes, protocols, and meticulous record-keeping. This reference to Spain shifts Bonner into a discourse resembling scholarship. Despite his fearsome reputation, he remains a man of learning, educated at Oxford. This unusual pairing of scholar and torturer was not rare in medieval Europe, where intellectual refinement and extreme cruelty frequently coexisted. The Spanish method commences with the question, as Bonner explains, engaging with his subject. The accused is initially shown the torture chamber and its instruments. Many confess at this point. Those who remain silent are stripped naked, as the vulnerability of nudity serves as a form of torment. As he speaks, the guards prepare the iron chair and add more coals to the compartment below. The metal glows an ominous dull red, radiating palpable heat. Bonner continues, saying that if sight fails to loosen the tongue, they proceed to the strappado, much like what you've already experienced, but the Spanish version includes refinements, weights attached to the feet, and sudden drops that shatter the shoulders more effectively. His casual description of such suffering reveals much about medieval attitudes toward pain. Physical agony was not hidden away or minimized. It was a publicly acknowledged part of justice. The torturer's craft was discussed with the same professional interest as masonry or shipbuilding. Their water torture is particularly effective, Bonner adds with disturbing admiration. The victim is bound to an inclined rack, head lowered. A cloth is placed over the mouth and nose, and water is slowly poured onto it. This evokes the sensation of drowning, yet no actual harm results. Most break quickly using this method. What Bonner was describing, now known as waterboarding, would persist as a torture technique for centuries. The endurance of such methods across time reveals something unsettling about human nature and the willingness to inflict suffering in the name of security, justice, or truth. Enough talk. These moral calculations were faced by countless prisoners throughout the medieval period. Beyond the thick walls of the towers, London proceeded oblivious to their plight. Markets bustled, apprentices learned trades, children played in narrow streets. The normalcy of life continued parallel to the chamber's horrors. This separation between the public world and the hidden machinery of power is crucial to understanding medieval torture. Society functions because most people remain unaware of what occurs in these shadowy rooms. I am innocent. You say again, my voice cracking with fear despite your resolve. I have committed no treason. Bonus sighs, as if disappointed by your lack of cooperation. Very well, he says. The chair awaits. The guards move to seize you, but before they can reach you, the door to the chamber opens. A messenger enters and whispers urgently to Sir John, whose expression shifts from irritation to concern. Prepare the prisoner for transport, he orders suddenly. We depart for Hampton Court immediately. The king wishes to question this one personally. This unexpected development saves you from Bona's immediate attentions, though whether it represents rescue or merely a change of venue for your suffering remains unclear. What is clear is Bona's frustration at being denied his entertainment. Another time perhaps, he says, his gaze promising future pain. You are led from the chamber, not to your cell, but to the Tower's courtyard, where a covered wagon is waiting. The trip to Hampton Court Palace will take several hours, a respite, though the final destination might harbour its own fears. As the wagon moves through London's streets, you observe everyday life through the canvas that shields merchants calling out their goods, children darting between carts, and women bearing baskets of produce. This world now feels impossibly far, separated from you by more than physical distance. The torture chamber's experience creates a gulf between its victims and normal society. The road winds southwest through villages and fields. Inside the wagon, guards watch you impassively. Your injuries from prior torture sessions throb with every bump and jolt of the journey. The shoulders Brother Thomas reset constantly ached, and your fingers remained swollen from the thumbscrews. This physical suffering was common for medieval prisoners. Medical care existed mainly to keep them alive for further questioning, not to alleviate their pain. Records from the era describe prisoners whose bodies held lasting marks of their ordeal, twisted limbs, missing fingers, scarred flesh. Survivors of torture often carried this evidence for life. As the wagon moved, you drifted between awareness and unconsciousness. Exhaustion finally superseded pain. Dreams and reality merged. Dalton's blank face, Bonner's eager eyes, the mechanical click of the rack's ratchet, this psychological toll. The way torture etched itself upon the mind was as integral to the process as physical agony. Hours later, you were jolted awake as the wagon halted. The canvas cover is drawn back, exposing Hampton Court Palace, a magnificent red brick complex initiated by Cardinal Wolsey and expanded by King Henry VIII. Within another century, it will stand as one of England's most splendid royal residences. In 1447, it remains largely Wolsey's design. Guards lead you into the palace via corridors adorned with tapestries and lit by elaborate candle holders. The contrast with the Tower's grim dungeons is intensely striking. Here, wealth and power are evident in polished wood and gleaming metal. You are led to a small, comfortable chamber, not a cell, but a proper room with a bed, chair, and a window overlooking the palace gardens. A servant brings water for washing and clean clothing. After days in the Tower's squalor, these simple comforts feel almost unreal. A physician arrives to examine your injuries. Unlike Brother Thomas's rough ministrations, this man's care is gentle and thorough. He applies salves, binds wounds, and provides a tincture for pain. His demeanor indicates you are now a guest, not a prisoner. The king will see you tomorrow, he explains, wishing you well enough to speak clearly. This dramatic shift from the torture chamber to a royal audience would disorient anyone. Yet in medieval justice, such reversals were not uncommon. Favor and disfavor could shift suddenly based on court politics or royal whim. Alone in the chamber, you finally slept soundly for the first time since your arrest. When morning arrived, you were given breakfast, not prison gruel but bread, cheese and ale. The servant who delivered it offered no explanation for your altered status. Guards arrived mid-morning to escort you to the king's presence. Though no longer rough in their handling, they remained vigilant. You were led through more splendid corridors to a private audience chamber where King Henry V awaited. Henry is unlike what one might expect. Just 26, he has already reigned for 25 years, ascending to the throne as an infant. Thin and scholarly, he lacks the forceful presence of his warrior father, Henry Vive. Instead, he radiates a gentle, almost ethereal quality, which some deem saintly and others weak. The king is seated in a carved chair beside a window. No courtiers are present. This is a private audience. He gestures for you to approach and studies your face with curious intensity. "You are accused of plotting against our person," he says finally, his voice soft but clear. "Yet we find no conviction in the accusations. Tell us truthfully, have you conspired against your king?" There's something about his direct gaze that compels honesty. You repeat your innocence, explaining how political rivals might have manufactured the charges against you. Henry listens attentively, nodding occasionally. When you finish, he remains silent for several moments, his expression thoughtful. "We have witnessed excessive cruelty perpetrated in our name," he states finally. "The Tower's methods disturb our conscience, despite our advisors' insistence on their necessity." This acknowledgement provides insight into the intricate moral landscape of medieval kingship. Even those who permitted torture might doubt its rightness. Henry V, with his religious sensibilities, found the more severe facets of governance especially challenging. "We deem you innocent," the king proclaims, "and shall order your release. Yet understand this mercy carries expectation, your steadfast loyalty in these troubled times." With these words, your ordeal concludes as abruptly as it commenced, from accused traitor to royal favorite in mere days. Such dramatic reversals defined the precarious world of medieval politics. As you depart the king's presence, still grappling with this unforeseen reprieve, a courtier reveals the true cause of your deliverance. Your chief accuser has confessed under torture to fabricating evidence against many innocent people, including you. The irony is sharp. The very torture system that nearly destroyed you has ultimately saved you, yet only after inflicting undeserved agony. And in the Tower, other innocent people continue to suffer what you escaped. This cycle is repeated throughout medieval history. Torture yields both false confessions and sporadic truths in unknowable ratios. The system sustains itself through this uncertainty. Every genuine conspiracy revealed validates numerous wrongful accusations. Your freedom includes the restoration of property and status. Within days, you return to London society as if nothing had occurred, yet everything has shifted. Your body displays the signs of the Tower's attention. More profoundly, your mind holds memories that isolate you from those who have never faced the chamber's horrors. This psychological distance, the divide between those who have endured torture and those who have not, remains consistent across centuries. From medieval cells to contemporary detention facilities, the experience of systematic pain generates a knowledge unspeakable in words. Some survivors of medieval torture found solace in religion, others pursued vengeance against their tormentors. Many simply attempted to forget, though nightmares and sudden terrors often thwarted this. Though the body may mend, the mind retains every detail of the ordeal. You find yourself unable to pass the Tower without trembling. The sight of any uniforms similar to those worn by the Wyman warders makes your heart race. Sounds, like the clank of metal or the creak of wood under strain, trigger vivid flashbacks to the chamber and what you are experiencing. This persistent reliving of trauma would not be formally recognized or treated for centuries. Medieval society had no concept of psychological injury separate from physical harm or spiritual affliction. Those afflicted by what we now term post-traumatic stress were frequently labeled melancholic or possessed. As time passes, you realize your experience in the Tower has permanently altered you. This change extends beyond the lingering pain in injured joints or the nightmares disrupting sleep. It reshapes your perception of authority, justice, and human nature. This transformation from innocent civilian to torture survivor occurred repeatedly throughout the medieval era. In England, hundreds passed through the Tower's chambers under the tutor alone. In Spain, the Inquisition processed thousands. Across Europe, local authorities routinely used torture as a standard investigative tool for serious crimes. Specific methods differed by region and time, for instance. The strappado was most common in Germany, while the broadquin's wooden boards tightened around the legs until bones shattered, gained favor in France, and water torture was refined into an art form in Spain. England specialized in stretching techniques such as the rack. Despite these regional variations, the fundamental logic remained constant. Physical pain would extract truth. This assumption held true despite ample evidence that torture produced whatever confession the torturer sought, true or false. Bishop Bonner, whose attentions you narrowly escaped, continued his career under Queen Mary Tudor, earning his nickname the Devil's Dancing Bear through his enthusiastic persecution of Protestants. Historical records attribute to him the personal torture and condemnation of dozens during Mary's short rule. Bonner's techniques merged psychological manipulation with physical suffering. He frequently started by offering prisoners unexpected kindness, including food, comfort, and theological debate. Only when this method proved ineffective did he resort to progressively harsher tortures. The good cop, bad cop routine, centuries before the term emerged, proved remarkably effective. The shift from initial kindness to subsequent cruelty disoriented victims, hindering resistance. Many succumbed to this psychological whiplash even before serious physical torture commenced. Bonner's career demonstrates that medieval European torture was not solely about inflicting pain. This sophisticated system integrated psychological manipulation, social isolation, sensory deprivation, and physical suffering to shatter an individual's will. Consequently, the medieval torture chamber embodies not only brutality, but a profound grasp of human psychology. Its practitioners understood that fear is often more potent than pain, recognizing that anticipation exponentially increases suffering. They employed social isolation and sensory manipulation to erode resistance. This sophisticated psychological dimension distinguishes medieval European torture from less complex punitive violence in other historical settings. The chamber was not merely a site of pain infliction, it was a meticulously engineered environment where every detail, from architecture to procedures, served the objective of breaking human resistance. As you rebuild your life after the tower, you find society offers little sympathy for torture survivors. Those who haven't experienced it cannot comprehend it. Those who approve of the system see no cause to question its effects. Those who might sympathize fear associating with someone once accused of treason, even if later cleared. This social isolation, the inability to share or process traumatic experience, amplified the psychological damage of torture itself. Without community backing or formal therapy, survivors largely endured in silence their unseen wounds, as enduring as their physical scars. Months after your release, you meet a former tower guard in a London tavern. He doesn't recognize you. To him, prisoners were merely interchangeable bodies, not individuals. You watch him drink and laugh, seemingly unburdened by his involvement in systematic cruelty. This, too, is how torture persisted in medieval society. Those who carried out these acts divided their actions, separating professional obligation from moral accountability. Few torturers saw themselves as evil, most perceived their work as necessary service to the crown and country. The memory of narrowly escaping Bishop Bonner's scrutiny remains with you throughout life. Dreams of the iron chair, heated to a glowing red, persisted for years. The scent of hot metal provokes instant panic. Certain rooms, especially stone chambers with low ceilings, become impenetrable. These reactions, now understood as trauma, were unnamed in medieval England. They were merely the expected result of the tower's actions, the unseen cost borne by those who endured its spaces. Your account, from false accusation and torture to sudden release, reflects experiences common to many who faced medieval justice. The arbitrariness, physical suffering, psychological manipulation, and lasting consequences form a pattern repeated across the era. What distinguishes medieval torture from modern views is not mainly the methods employed. While many techniques persist, the social acceptance surrounding them differs. Torture was not concealed or denied. It was an acknowledged, regulated component of the justice system, complete with rules, procedures, and official roles. This institutional nature made medieval torture particularly insidious. Operating openly under royal authority, administered by professionals following established protocols, it possessed a legitimacy that isolated acts of cruelty could never attain. As you trace the raised scars on your thumbs, permanent souvenirs of Dalton's attentions, you comprehend something few of your contemporaries grasp. The divide between civilization and barbarism is far narrower than most imagine. Normal, decent people can engage in terrible systems. Sophisticated societies can implement methodical cruelty. The ability to inflict sanctioned suffering exists just below the surface of organized society. Years pass following your experience in the Tower of London. Life returns to a semblance of normalcy, though the memories remain vivid. Then in 1455, England erupted into civil war, later known as the Wars of the Roses. As political fortunes shifted violently, you determined England was too perilous. Like many merchants and scholars fleeing the conflict, you journeyed to the European continent. Your travels first led you to the German lands, a mosaic of independent cities, principalities and ecclesiastical territories within the Holy Roman Empire. Far from the Tower of London, you discover that the art of torture manifests in different forms, reflecting local legal traditions and cultural practices. In Nuremberg, a great imperial city, you encounter a justice system both similar to and unlike England's. Like England, Nuremberg utilizes torture as an investigative tool. Unlike England, where torture remains primarily a tool of state security used against political prisoners, German cities apply it more broadly to ordinary criminal cases. The German method of torture is organized within what scholars term the Carolina Code, the criminal law of Emperor Charles V, issued formally in 1532, yet already affecting legal practice. This code sets specific rules for when and how torture could be used, establishing a structure that simultaneously permits and limits judicial brutality. Under the Carolina Code, torture demands significant prior evidence rather than merely an accusation. Authorization for torture requires multiple eyewitness accounts, physical evidence, or a documented history of similar crimes to limit arbitrary use. While these standards are sometimes ignored, they aim to restrict arbitrary application. At Nuremberg, permission is granted to observe a criminal proceeding, not the torture, though the judicial process is visible. A local official then details the graduated system of torture employed in German territories. We start with verbal intimidation. He details the fate awaiting the accused in vivid detail if they refuse to confess. Many confess at this stage without physical coercion. This psychological dimension, using fear to precede actual pain, is evident throughout European torture systems. The mind's capacity to anticipate suffering is often more effective than the suffering itself. If verbal intimidation is unsuccessful, the official proceeds to territio realis, displaying and demonstrating the instruments of torture. The accused is brought to the chamber and observes the preparation of the devices. This staged demonstration, a theatrical portrayal of impending pain, constitutes a critical phase in German judicial torture. Court records indicate that numerous defendants confessed during this demonstration phase prior to undergoing actual physical torture. Only if these preliminary measures fail do we resort to the question of actual physical torture. The official concludes even then, we follow strict protocols concerning duration, intensity, and medical supervision. These protocols reveal the paradoxical nature of medieval torture, a system that inflicts extreme suffering while simultaneously attempting to regulate that suffering through bureaucratic rules. The conflict between brutality and restriction shapes judicial torture across history. In Nuremberg, you can explore the underground chambers beneath the town hall where torture occurred. Unlike the tower's plainness, the Nuremberg torture chamber is nearly clinically outfitted. Various specialized devices line the walls, each engineered for specific outcomes. The German territories have developed their own distinctive instruments. The most infamous is the pair of torture devices, a pear-shaped metal device inserted into bodily orifices and expanded by a screw mechanism. The knee splitter, which uses pointed spikes to crush the knee joint between wooden plates, and the breast ripper, which tears flesh with heated metal claws, primarily used on women accused of adultery or abortion. What is striking about the German approach is its methodical nature. Torture is not merely systematic in application, but in design. Each device is engineered for specific effects, calibrated to maximize pain without necessarily causing death. This mirrors a broader German cultural emphasis on technical precision and craftsmanship, applied disturbingly to the production of suffering. From Germany, your travels lead to France, where torture has developed yet another regional character. Under the system of royal court judiciaries, torture served as part of an inquisitorial legal process, distinct from both English and German methods. In Paris, this involved the use of broadins, wooden boards placed around the legs and tightened with cords until bones fractured. You hear of the estrapade, the French version of the strap, incorporating national refinements such as weights attached to the victim's feet and periodic dousing with cold water to maintain consciousness during extended sessions. The French have systematized torture differently than their German counterparts. Where German practice emphasizes graduated intensity, French procedures focus on duration and repetition. The French approach involves extended questioning over multiple sessions with carefully limited physical pain in each. A French legal scholar explains the rationale: constant moderate pain with little hope of relief breaks resistance more effectively than brief extreme agony. The mind surrenders when it recognizes that suffering will continue indefinitely. This insight, that hopelessness is often more devastating than pain itself, informed the French torture system. By carefully managing physical suffering for extended application, French authorities establish a psychological environment where resistance appears futile. Your European travels offer perspective on how torture varies regionally while keeping certain constants. It functions in both punitive and investigative roles everywhere, combining physical and psychological elements. Throughout its operation, within a framework of rules and procedures that simulate judicial propriety, torture fundamentally generates the same problem: the impossibility of discerning true confessions from false ones. Regardless of location, England, Germany, France, or elsewhere, torture yields the information sought by torturers, irrespective of its correspondence to reality. This inherent unreliability raises a critical question. If torture frequently yields false confessions, why did medieval European societies continue to use it? The explanation illuminates medieval views on truth, the body, and pain. Medieval legal theory asserted that physical suffering connected directly to truth. Pain was thought to reveal the authentic self by stripping away falsehoods. This belief arose partly from religious concepts, especially the idea that suffering purifies the soul, and partly from observing how those under torture ultimately reveal what alleviates their pain. This theological aspect of torture is most evident in the practices of the Spanish Inquisition, which travelers' accounts reveal. Established in 1478, the Inquisition utilizes torture for purification, not solely for extracting information. Pain evolves into a route for spiritual purification, where confession signifies not merely an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but the initial stride toward redemption. The Inquisition's effectiveness stems less from heightened cruelty in its methods and more from the scope of its approach. They employ largely the same techniques as secular courts, but integrate spiritual authority with judicial power. This allows them to harness both physical terror and dread concerning one's eternal soul. An Italian merchant who endured inquisitorial questioning detailed the psychological tactics employed. They began by invoking God's mercy, then shifted to outlining the petitioner's transgressions against him. Spiritual guidance preceded instruments of pain. This blend of pastoral care and threat disoriented the mind until it could no longer discern whether the goal was salvation or physical destruction. This fusion of spiritual and physical coercion marks the Inquisition's innovation. By framing torture as a potentially redemptive suffering, they shift resistance from heroic endurance to spiritual obstinacy, a sin that intensifies the original heresy. Beyond these regional differences, your journey reveals a deeper truth about medieval torture. Its social role transcends individual instances. Public awareness of torture's existence, even without direct observation, fosters a climate of compliance and self-regulation. In medieval society, although most people never personally experienced the torture chamber, its existence was widely known. Knowledge of it gained through descriptions, visible scars on survivors, and public punishments following confessions shaped behavior by discouraging actions that risked accusation. A French historian elaborates on this dynamic, noting the chamber's influence extends beyond its physical confines. Individuals scrutinize their speech and deeds, aware of the consequences for those who attract official notice. The torture chamber disciplined society without the need to torture everyone. This idea that torture served as a wider system of social control through fear explains why medieval authorities kept it, despite its unreliability for obtaining truth. The actual truth of individual confessions was less important than the generalized effect of fearful compliance. As you continue your European journey and reach Venice in northern Italy, you encounter a highly sophisticated application of this principle. The Venetian Republic, with its complex governmental structures, transformed torture into an administrative science. Within the Doge's palace, the seat of Venetian government, torture chambers are physically integrated into the architecture of governance. The notorious Pozzi Wells and Pommi Leeds dungeon cells, situated below water and in scorching attics respectively, inflict environmental torture through extreme conditions before physical methods are applied. A Venetian official details this approach with disturbing candor. Most never require the actual instruments. The Pozzi, with their darkness and damp, confuse the mind. The Pommi, where summer heat becomes unbearable, exhaust resistance. By the time questioning starts, most are ready to speak without further urging. This environment-based approach, using architecture as a tool of torment, surpasses direct physical methods by establishing conditions that gradually erode mental state and physical well-being. Venetian authorities secure compliance without the crudeness of severe bodily harm. Despite regional differences, certain constants appear throughout your European journeys. Torture chambers are usually subterranean, exploiting the psychological effects of dissent and isolation. They operate in secrecy, despite public acknowledgement of their existence. They use both specialized tools and common items, modified to inflict pain. Crucially, wherever torture occurs, it induces identical moral compromises in those who inflict it. In European taverns, executioners and interrogators are seen, men whose daily work involves inflicting extreme suffering. Some drink heavily, others find dark humor about their profession. Many live in isolation, their essential yet tainted role places them at society's margins. A retired German executioner, emboldened by wine, reveals, "We are society's necessary sin. They require what we do, but feign ignorance of it. We enable their false sense of justice without brutality." This moral conflict, the presence of organized cruelty in purportedly civilized societies, is the core paradox of medieval torture. By assigning cruelty to specialized practitioners operating under official power, medieval communities preserve collective innocence while reaping the benefits of torture. After years abroad, circumstances permit your return to England, where the Wars of the Roses have finally concluded with the Tudor dynasty taking the throne. You find London somewhat transformed, yet in other aspects unchanged. The Tower remains, its torture chamber still operational, though now serving Tudor rather than Lancastrian interests. Your own experience there feels simultaneously immediate and distant, a wound that has scarred over but still aches when pressed. You steer clear of routes that bring you within view of the Tower's walls. You sleep with a candle burning to repel dreams of shadowed stone rooms. This enduring consequence, the lasting psychological mark of the torture chamber, embodies torture's most persistent effect. Beyond extracted intelligence or secured confessions, torture permanently reshapes those who endure it. While the body may recover, the mind retains a unique awareness of human fragility that cannot be erased. A physician treating former prisoners notes that the chamber alters how they inhabit their bodies. Ordinary sensations like cold stone, tight clothing, and darkness trigger memories of helplessness, making the world feel potentially threatening in ways others cannot comprehend. This experience mirrors your own. Certain sensations, the creak of a wooden chair, the scent of damp stone, the clank of metal on metal, instantly recall the Tower, evoking physical responses of fear and helplessness. These reactions have lessened over time but never vanished entirely. Your European travels revealed that torture, despite varying methods, produces similar effects universally. Across English, German, French, Spanish, and Italian chambers, the fundamental experience merges physical pain, psychological manipulation, and social isolation to shatter the individual will. This shared pattern hints at something disturbing about human nature and social organization. Despite cultural variances, societies consistently devise systematic cruelty when it serves power. The specifics may differ, yet the core dynamics persist across borders and cultures. As you enter the final chapter of your life in Tudor England, you sometimes hear accounts of the Tower's ongoing use. Under Henry VIII, political and religious prisoners occupied the same rooms you knew decades before. Askew, John Fry, Thomas More. These names will enter history as the victims of the Tudor religious conflicts. These continuities across time, the persistent use of torture despite shifts in regime, religion, and social conditions, reveal its institutional nature. Torture endures not from individual cruelty, but because it serves structural purposes within systems of power and control. This understanding that cruelty can be systemic, rather than merely personal, is perhaps the most crucial insight gained from your journey through Europe's torture chambers. The true horror stems not merely from specific instruments or methods, but from the bureaucratic acceptance of suffering, the turning of pain into mere procedure. In your later years, you sometimes recount your experience to close friends. Some hear with empathy, others with unease or doubt. Most find it difficult to grasp how systematic cruelty could exist alongside the religious and civic ideals medieval society professed to defend. This cognitive dissonance, the divergence between professed values and actual conduct, shaped the role of torture in medieval Europe. Societies held conflicting beliefs. Justice demanded humane treatment, yet torture was deemed essential for security and truth. This contradiction endured because most individuals avoided direct confrontation, perceiving torture only as an external reality impacting others. Your personal experience has eliminated this comfortable separation. Having experienced the pressure of the thumbscrews and the rack's tension, you cannot sustain the notion that torture is reserved only for the guilty or that it reliably yields truth. You know personally how easily innocent flesh yields to sufficient pain. This understanding, the lived experience of the torture chamber rather than its sanitized legal theory, is a perspective few in medieval society held. Most people, including those who authorized and administered torture, upheld comforting illusions regarding its justice and necessity. Your exploration of Europe's diverse torture systems has exposed a core truth. Despite regional variations in methods and procedures, torture universally serves the same essential functions, extracting confessions irrespective of truth, punishing via process rather than result, and fostering wider social compliance through exemplary fear. This understanding situates your personal experience within a broader historical pattern, not an isolated trauma, but a manifestation of a widespread practice that molded medieval European notions of truth, the body, justice, and power. As night descends on your last evening of reflection, you consider how the memory of the torture chamber both haunts and educates you. It reveals human vulnerability, demonstrating how easily bodies and wills yield under systematic duress. It exposed institutional cruelty and the mechanics by which suffering is routinized through procedures and roles. Crucially, it showed how civilized societies accommodate practices contrary to their values via compartmentalization and distancing. These insights, gained at immense personal cost, form knowledge inaccessible to those who never entered the chamber. They explain why you would not survive a day in a medieval torture chamber. Not due to physical frailty, but because no alternative existed. The system was engineered to bypass human endurance via the deliberate deployment of physical and psychological stress. The profound horror of medieval torture resides not in any single method, but in the systematic use of psychology, technology, and social power to shatter human defiance. Against this unified assault, individual volition, however resolute, is ultimately inadequate. As your life nears its end in Tudor England, you have observed the shift from medieval to early modern society. Having endured imprisonment and experienced Europe's diverse systems of judicial torture, you hold a unique insight into how physical suffering was institutionalized within justice systems. In your final days, you contemplate the significance of this dark knowledge. Your grandchildren sit at your bedside, yearning for tales of your merchant adventures across Europe. Yet there are certain stories you never tell them. The memories of the towers and dungeons, the sight of Bonner's heated implements, the sounds that linger in your dreams. One evening, your eldest grandchild asks, "Grandfather, is it true that criminals are tortured in the tower? A friend claimed his father told him dreadful things happened there." The question catches you completely off guard. How do you explain such darkness to a child while recognizing the importance of truth, even uncomfortable truth, in understanding the world they will inherit? You answer carefully, but it is vital to understand why these things exist, not merely that they do. And so begins your final lesson, an explanation not just of torture mechanics, but of its meaning within society. You share with them, gently, what your experience has taught you about how civilized societies accommodate practices that seem to contradict their values. The tower's chambers, you explain, reveal something vital about how people perceive truth and pain. For centuries, people believed that extreme suffering could expose hidden truths, that the body under duress would surrender secrets the mind tried to keep. Your grandchildren listen intently as you continue. This belief endures despite evidence that those in sufficient pain will state whatever alleviates it regardless of truth. This paradox shows how societies desperately seek simple methods for determining truth, even when those methods prove inadequate. This understanding that torture endures not because it is effective, but because societies desire its efficacy, is one of the most profound lessons of your life. The torture chamber functions as both a physical and symbolic space, a place where the comforting illusion of accessible truth is preserved through institutionalized suffering. But what compels the king to permit such atrocities? Your granddaughter asks, her young mind, still operating within the simple moral framework of childhood. The question strikes at the core of political authority in medieval and early modern Europe. How do you explain to a child that authority often necessitates violence or the threat thereof to sustain itself? Kings and queens, you explain carefully, believe they must safeguard their realms from dangers both external and internal. The towers and chambers symbolize one method they employ to uncover these threats. Whether this approach is effective is a question each person must decide for themselves. This diplomatic answer satisfies the children, though you know the full reality is more complex. Royal authority across medieval Europe depended on monopolizing legitimate violence, distinguishing between criminal cruelty and sanctioned force. Torture represents the most extreme manifestation of this distinction, turning what would otherwise be criminal assault into official procedure. When speaking with your grandchildren, you offer them a perspective few of their generation will encounter. This is an understanding of torture, derived not from legal theory or rumor, but from direct experience. Though painful to gain, this knowledge is valuable for helping future generations grasp the complexities of justice and cruelty. Remind them that what occurs in those chambers impacts not only those within, but everyone who is aware of their existence. The tower's dungeons shape how people throughout England think and act, making them cautious in what they say and do, even without committing a crime. This understanding that torture serves as social control beyond its immediate victims is one of the most sophisticated insights you've developed through your experiences. The chamber's power extends far beyond its walls, creating a society disciplined by the threat of extreme suffering. When your grandchildren depart, your thoughts turn to the wider historical context of your life. Born under the Lancastrians, you survived the Wars of the Roses, and now witness the Tudor consolidation of power. You have observed how torture adapted to shifting political environments while retaining its core functions. Under Henry VIII, the Tower chambers were repurposed for religious persecution instead of solely for political security. And Askew, whose story you have heard, endured such severe torture that her shoulders and hips dislocated, leaving her unable to walk to her own execution. She was carried to the stake in a chair, her body broken, yet her will remained unbroken. She never revealed the names of fellow Protestants her torturers were seeking. Stories like Askew demonstrate a crucial truth about torture that contradicts its theoretical justification. Those with the firmest principles endure the longest, whereas the innocent or peripheral figures break swiftly. This paradox, that torture is least effective against the dedicated conspirators it targets, highlights one of the system's fundamental contradictions. In your dreams that night, you return to the tower's underground chamber. But this time, you are not the prisoner, but an observer watching the procession of history's victims. From forgotten medieval peasants to famous Tudor nobility, all endure the same core experience despite varying historical contexts. This vision persists across centuries, unseen by you. You observe torture's slow evolution and eventual official rejection. In the 17th century, growing legal constraints saw judges increasingly doubt torture's reliability and morality. As Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire and Beccaria condemned torture as both ineffective and immoral, public opinion slowly shifted. By the late 18th century, most European states officially abolished judicial torture, Prussia abandoned it in 1740, France in 1780, and other nations followed. Yet, even in your vision, you observe that abolishment on paper does not always translate to practice. Unofficial torture persists in numerous locations, concealed from public sight, yet serving identical fundamental goals. This vision guides you further into archaeological discoveries centuries after your era. You observe modern researchers uncovering physical evidence of medieval torture chambers, the iron fittings where racks were secured, the drainage channels for water torture, and the hook points for state-pedo ropes. These material remains offer a tangible link between the past and future, revealing what written records often conceal. In Oxford, archaeologists found a medieval prison featuring specialized restraint mechanisms. In German castle dungeons, they discovered implements preserved by dry conditions. In Spanish administrative buildings, they unearthed the chambers where the Inquisition conducted its questioning. These findings expose the physical infrastructure that facilitated judicial torture, the technological dimensions frequently ignored in historical narratives centered on legal theory. Modern scientists, in your view, examine the physical consequences of historical torture methods. They validate what you experienced. These methods, such as the strappado, indeed dislocate the shoulders when applied, as described in medieval manuals. The rack separates joints when operated according to historical accounts, and water torture creates the sensation of drowning without necessarily causing death. These scientific confirmations validate the historical record that future generations might otherwise dismiss as exaggeration. They offer material evidence of experiences many find unbelievable, demonstrating that human ingenuity has systematically caused maximum pain without death. Crucially, your vision reveals how future generations will interpret medieval torture through psychological lenses unknown to your era, recognizing concepts like trauma and post-traumatic stress as equally significant as physical methods of torture. The experiences you endured but could not name, the flashbacks, nightmares, and triggered responses to specific stimuli, are now gaining scientific recognition and explanation. This psychological understanding represents perhaps the most significant evolution in how torture is conceptualized. Where medieval theory focused almost exclusively on the body as the site of truth extraction, future generations recognized the mind as equally, if not more significant, both in terms of torturous methods and its lasting effects. You awaken from this strange prophetic dream with a sense of historical perspective impossible in waking life. Your individual experience, though terrible, is one thread in a centuries-long tapestry, tracing from ancient practices and medieval refinement to eventual official rejection and continued clandestine use. This historical context offers little solace, yet it is important. The suffering you experienced was not random or isolated, but rather part of long-standing institutional practices that would eventually be questioned and reformed. This does not minimize individual suffering, but situates it within larger patterns of social evolution. The next morning, still lost in your dream vision, you decide to record your experiences and reflections, not for immediate publication, but for future generations who might benefit from first-hand testimony using increasingly affordable paper provided by the tutors. You begin writing your account of the tower's chambers and your subsequent European observations. This act of documentation is itself an important historical process. Most torture victims throughout medieval history left no records of their experiences. Their suffering is known only through official documents created by the very authorities who authorized their torment. These bureaucratic records, torture warrants, interrogation transcripts, and confessions tell only partial stories, omitting the lived reality of the chamber. Your account, blending personal experience with comparative observations across Europe, provides something rare in historical records: a victim's perspective on institutionalized suffering. Though you cannot know if your writings will survive for future readers, the act of creating them feels important, a testimony against forgetting. As your quill scratches across the paper, consider the final wisdom you might offer. What central understanding has your journey through Europe's torture chambers provided? After much reflection, you settle on this. Torture reveals more about the societies that institutionalize it than the individuals who endure it. This insight, that torture functions as a mirror reflecting social values, fears, and contradictions, represents your most profound conclusion. The chamber's existence reveals tensions between stated principles and actual practices, between theological ideals and administrative realities, and between human empathy and institutional requirements. In medieval Christian Europe, a religion centered on a suffering savior simultaneously condemned cruelty and sanctioned systematic suffering. Societies that lauded mercy in their literature and art nevertheless maintained chambers specifically constructed to maximize pain. Legal systems, in their pursuit of truth, utilized methods that reliably produced falsehood under duress. These contradictions expose medieval torture not as an anomaly, but as a reflection of fundamental social tensions between mercy and security, between individual rights and collective protection, and between bodily integrity and state authority. This chamber is where these tensions converge, a physical space where abstract contradictions become concrete practices. Your final reflections address why medieval torture eventually faced questioning and reform. This change stemmed not primarily from moral evolution, but from practical reconsideration. As judicial systems established more sophisticated evidence standards, torture's unreliability became increasingly problematic. Furthermore, as political legitimacy began demanding popular consent instead of mere fear, openly brutal practices transformed from an asset into a liability. This pragmatic rather than purely ethical shift explains why the official abandonment of torture never meant its complete elimination. When officially sanctioned torture became politically inconvenient, it simply went underground, continuing in practice while denied in principle. This pattern of official disavowal, coupled with unofficial continuation, characterized torture's evolution from the Enlightenment onward. These understandings of institutional contradictions, pragmatic over moral reforms, and the divergence between official and actual practices are the wisdom gained from your life's unwanted education in the torture chamber. They represent knowledge acquired at a terrible personal cost, yet are valuable for those trying to grasp how complex societies permit practices that defy their stated values. As you complete your written account, sealing it in your family Bible for future generations, you realize the most vital legacy of your experience is not the physical suffering endured, but the perspective gained. You have seen behind a curtain most never look past, witnessing the machinery of power in its starkest, most direct form. This viewpoint enables the recognition of similar patterns in less intense social behaviors. Institutions universally utilize various combinations of fear, pain, and reward to mold conduct. The chamber is not an anomaly, but the most intense manifestation of control mechanisms operating subtly across society. In your final days, as Tudor England undergoes religious and political shifts, you discover peace in this historical context. Your personal suffering, though profound, links to larger patterns extending across time. The chamber's logic, which uses pain to enforce compliance, is present wherever power acts without limits, appearing differently across cultures and ages, yet retaining consistent psychological roots. This link between personal experience and universal patterns provides meaning to senseless suffering. The torture chamber transforms from a site of personal trauma into a lens for understanding power's operation in human society. It is a terrible but instructive example of authority's fundamental relationship to physical bodies. As your life concludes in Tudor England, you leave behind both visible and invisible legacies. The tangible aspects, your commerce, family, possessions, will endure for generations before becoming historical footnotes. The intangible legacy, your grasp of systematic cruelty and institutional contradictions, is preserved in your written work, awaiting readers who may find value in its painful insight. And so your story concludes where it started, in England under a monarchy that still retains the Tower of London, a society still molded by the distant threat they symbolize. Your passage through Europe's diverse torture systems has brought you full geographic circle and intellectual transformation, offering a perspective impossible for those who have never known the chamber's reality. This perspective views systematic cruelty not as an aberration but as institutional practice, recognizing torture's social functions beyond individual cases. Understanding the divergence between official narratives and lived experience is your final contribution to historical knowledge. Though you could not escape the chamber's attention, your insights might help future generations recognize and resist similar patterns in their own times. The wisdom gained through suffering becomes your legacy. It is a testament to how even humanity's darkest practices can yield vital understanding when critically examined by the survivors. The torture chamber, though terrible, offered an education unavailable elsewhere, a direct confrontation with power's fundamental relationship to pain, fear, and compliance. As night descends upon your final evening, your mind drifts back to that initial descent into the underground chambers of the towers so many years ago. The fear you experienced then has evolved into something more intricate, an understanding of why such places exist, how they operate beyond their stated goals, and what they disclose about the societies that govern them. This realization does not erase the terrors or mend the physical wounds, but it offers a context that renders them tolerable. Threads linking individual suffering to collective patterns and historical processes. Your experience in the chamber, though intensely personal, engages institutional practices across centuries and continents. With this knowledge offering no solace, you drift into sleep one last time. Your passage through medieval Europe's darkest institutions is complete. The knowledge acquired at such a terrible price now extends to future generations who may recognize similar patterns in their own eras without direct experience of the chamber's horrors. This may be the most valuable legacy, the potential that understanding history's darkest practices can help prevent their recurrence or continuation. By understanding the existence and function of medieval torture chambers, future societies might better recognize and resist institutional cruelty in their own times, regardless of its form. This hope that painful knowledge can serve a preventative purpose gives meaning to senseless suffering. The chamber's legacy transforms from mere trauma into education, from damage into insight. By turning this experience into understanding, even history's darkest chapters offer valuable light for the future. As your story ends, this insight is the final gift, confronting humanity's capacity for systematic cruelty rather than ignoring it, offers the best hope for eventually overcoming it. The medieval torture chamber, fully understood, is not merely a location of historical horror, but a lesson in recognizing and resisting similar patterns wherever and whenever they arise. With this insight as your legacy, your exploration of medieval Europe's torture chambers concludes a dark yet instructive chapter in the larger human narrative of justice, power, suffering, and ultimate reform. The experience that no one would survive even a day within becomes, through historical perspective, a lens for understanding dynamics that persist long after the chamber's official abandonment. And in the space between historical specificity and universal patterns lies the chamber's most important lesson: that understanding our darkest practices offers the best hope for eventually moving beyond them toward forms of justice that maintain security without requiring systematic suffering to do so.